Hi, I'm George Kilpatrick here with Dana Balter. She's a candidate for the 24th Congressional District, and we're live on Facebook, which means that you can get involved in the conversation. So as you are watching this live stream, which we're live, it's Tuesday right now, you can watch this and you can give us any of your thoughts, questions, concerns for Dana as she seeks to be the next congressperson from the 24th Congressional District. And I guess, Dana, just to remind people what that district entails.
Yes, it includes all of Onondaga County, all of Cayuga County, all of Wayne County, and the western half of Oswego County, including the cities of Oswego and Fulton. All
right, so let's talk about that. Again, remind you, you can get in at any time. This is an open forum for you to ask questions directly of Dana. Dana, for those who may not know you, tell us a little about your background.
Okay. Well, I have most recently been teaching at Syracuse University at the
Most recently,
School.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
This is my most recent job. I've stopped now because we're in the general election and I can't teach anymore because I don't have time. I miss it very much. But I was teaching courses in citizenship and policy and administration and democracy, which I love. And before I got into academia, I worked in disability services in the nonprofit sector. I worked at an organization that provides support services to adults with cognitive disabilities, helping them live independently in the community. And I was also in education there. I started as a teacher and then became the director of education. And that job is where my interest in policy grew out of. I went in thinking that I wanted to do direct service work. And what I found after working there for a number of years is that there were certain systemic problems that if we didn't address them, the people that we were serving would never make the kind of progress that they needed to make. And in order for them to be successful, we had to figure out how to tear down those barriers. I decided the way to pursue that was to study policy. And that really is sort of at the foundation of the way I look at public policy and what the role of government is. It should be about removing barriers for people so that everybody in this country has a fair shake at success.
And you talked about moving barriers, certainly, especially in the area of disability rights. How are you seeing those rights being upheld right now?
Well, I think, it's been a long fought battle to make the progress that we've made over the decades, not just in disability rights, but in civil rights of all kinds. One of the things that I'm really concerned about what's happening in this country these days is that we're seeing a lot of eroding of those rights and of that progress that we've made. When it comes to disability rights in particular, you have to look no further than Betsy DeVos at the Department of Education, who is rolling back protections for students with disabilities. We saw this year an attack on the ADA, right? The Americans with Disabilities Act by the GOP, which is just astonishing to me. So I think it is sort of more important than ever for people to step up, not only running for office, but just in their communities, to step up and use their voices and say, no, we are not going to give up the hard-won progress. And in fact, we need to not only protect what we've achieved, but we need to expand those rights further.
Let's talk about your opponent and how you see yourself different than your opponent and what that difference will mean for the residents of the 24th.
So I think that there are quite a few very significant differences between me and John Katko. We differ a lot on our positions on the issues. And I think I have not been shy about being critical of the votes that he's cast on things like the tax bill, that I think is incredibly harmful for Central New Yorkers, Western New Yorkers, and for all Americans. Votes on environmental issues, where he has voted to roll back all of the protections that the Obama administration put in place, and he has by doing that, putting our world, our children, our grandchildren at risk. Voted a number of times to defund Planned Parenthood after promising he wouldn't do that, right? So we could talk about the issues, and there are plenty to talk about. Hopefully we'll discuss more of them. But I think one of the ways that I think one of the greatest differences between me and John Katko is the way we look at what this job is about, what sort of the fundamental responsibilities of being a representative are. As far as I'm concerned, the most important piece of this job is engaging with the people that you represent, showing up, listening to what they have to say, answering their questions, talking to them about how you see the issues, how you're thinking about things, and what you are planning to do about them. John Katko is incredibly inaccessible to us as his constituents. He won't hold up open public town hall meetings. It is next to impossible to get any information out of his staff at his office. I know I personally and lots of other people that I know have called to say, you know, there's a big vote coming up on, let's say, net neutrality. Where does the congressman stand on this issue? And what you get in response is, I don't have any information for you, or I'm not at liberty to share that, but I'll be happy to pass your concern along to the congressman. That's not enough. What we need to have between constituents and representative is a two-way conversation where information is coming and going, and we're discussing the challenges we face and how we're going to resolve them together.
So you would say that if you were elected, you would have a more accessible office that would be reflective of the issues of the people of the 24th?
Absolutely. I have made pledges about some of these things that go to the heart of sort of transparency and representation. I have promised that on every substantive vote I cast in Congress, I will put out a public statement explaining why I voted the way I did. Before I cast those substantive votes, I will have systematic mechanisms in place for people to give me input. And there will be lots of different ways to do that, right? Through public meetings, through roundtables, through online forums, through phone calls and letters, so that that information gets to me and I can understand how the people of this district are thinking about the issues and what they want. I've also committed to holding a minimum of 4 open town halls a year, 1 in each of the 4 counties in this district. And when I'm talking about an open town hall, what I mean is a public meeting that has ample notice, right? Minimum 48 hours notice, where anybody who wants to attend can come, and we are only restricted by the size of the venue. No tickets are required. And where people who come have the opportunity to ask questions. And those questions are not pre-screened, but it's a real conversation.
Speaking of questions that are not pre-screened, we're live on Facebook with the United Democrats of Onondaga County. We are with Dana Balter. She is the candidate for the 24th Congressional District, Democrat, inviting your questions, comments for Dana right now here, Tuesday. What time is it? About 10 after 6 p.m. here in Syracuse. And a lot of, this is where we're located. We're actually in East Syracuse, I believe. Yeah. And we're looking forward to hearing from you. Congress, right? A lot of concern about Congress and what many people feel is the abdication of the responsibilities of this elected body, given some of the policies that at least Democrats feel are detrimental to the country. So if you were elected, and presuming the majority stays as it is, what could you do? What might you do? Now, on the other hand, if there is a quote blue wave and somehow Congress changes, that would be different. But if you're in the minority, what power would you have? How would you deliver for this district, given those set of circumstances?
Okay. Well, first, I just have to say for the record, I believe that we are going to flip the House of Representatives, so Democrats will take control. But regardless of whether that happens, my approach in Congress would be the same. Whether I am in the majority party or the minority party, I think there are 2 critically important things to bear in mind. One, it is the job of our representative to go to Washington, to go to Congress, and work on both passing legislation that is beneficial to our community and bringing home resources that is beneficial to our community. And we need a lot of resources here. We are struggling in a lot of ways. The city of Syracuse is a perfect example. We need to bring a lot of resources here to do things like fight poverty. We all know that we have the unfortunate distinction of having the highest concentration of poverty among Black and Latino residents in the entire country.
So what can you do to impact that?
So we need to be supporting anti-poverty programs that have been demonstrated to work. We have a lot of good anti-poverty programs in this country. What the current administration is doing is trying to cut back on those programs. And what we need to do in Congress, we need our representative to do, is stand up and fight for more funding, for expanding those programs. Representative Barbara Lee is a champion in this area. I admire what she fights for. I think she has a phenomenal handle on these policies, and I am eager to get to Washington to work with her on expanding those programs. One of the things that's concerned me the most that I've seen coming out of the administration in terms of what I think the effect will be on Syracuse is what Ben Carson is doing at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, where they are raising rent on poor people.
Yes, they are.
They are cutting back on Section 8 vouchers, and they are reducing the amount of capital spending on building new affordable housing. Every one of those is the opposite of what we need to be doing. Here in Syracuse, of all places, we know how important making affordable housing available to everybody is. That's sort of your basic security around which you can build a successful life.
And you think your opponent has failed to deliver on those issues?
Well, I certainly don't see new resources coming here, and I have not heard him say a single word about these cuts or these proposals. And I would say that's the other part of what we depend on our representative to do. Part of it is passing law and bringing resources home. The other part is using the platform you have at your disposal, which is massive. People listen to you. Use that platform and raise your voice. Speak out about the things that matter. Make sure they stay on the agenda and we keep the national attention where it belongs.
All right, we are now getting you involved in this conversation. Lots of people want to weigh in and talk to Dana, candidate for the 24th Congressional District. Let's start with Seamus, who wants to know, how will you address the student loan debt crisis?
This is a really big problem, not just for the students who are facing debt, but a really big problem for our country. If we don't deal with this debt crisis, it could lead to financial collapse for the country. We have to take this seriously.
What's the solution, though? Is it, I mean, you look at, and this, you're talking to a parent who's got kids in school. So you're looking at astronomical, I guess that's a choice you're making around the school you go to, but there are some trade-offs.
Right, there absolutely are, and I think people should be free to make the choices that they want to make. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that there's a variety of options available to people. So one of the things I think we need to do is guarantee that kids can go to post-secondary programs, whether they are college, university, community college, vocational and technical programs, whatever the post-secondary program of their choice is, that they can do that debt-free. And part of that will be free tuition, right, at community college, for example. Part of it means that we need to make sure that we keep programs in place where students can, when they graduate, pay back their debt by doing community service, right? So if you go to work in a high-need area for 5 years, and you have your debt forgiven in exchange for that.
Kind of like Teach for America, right?
Right, and we have some great programs in this country that do that. It's another thing that we've seen in the last 2 years, the government cutting back on, right? We need to create more of those programs. Not only does that allow kids to go to school debt-free, but it also means that the communities that need their work the most are getting them, right? And then we need to get rid of things like predatory lending for students. The federal government should not be making money off of student loans. Again, under Betsy DeVos, we're seeing a return to some really disturbing student borrowing practices that we need to address. But I think going forward, the key is making sure that debt-free options are available for people who want them.
Can we fix immigration, and how?
Yeah, this is another big challenge we have, right? Our immigration system is definitely broken. I believe that we can fix it. I am an optimist, and I believe that every problem that we face has a solution. We have to work on this together. We have to be willing to work in a bipartisan way in order to create a lasting solution. We need to focus on something that both works for our economy and treats people humanely. And we can do both of those things. We're not doing a great job of it right now. I travel the district and I talk to people in our farming communities who are really struggling with the current visa system, right? Because they need to bring labor to work on the farms, and the visa system that we have in place doesn't allow them to have their labor needs met. It also doesn't allow the people who are coming here looking for work to be successful in that way. So we got to revamp that system so it works for both employers and employees.
I lost my feed, but I know that we had a question from Barb, and Barb wanted to know, what is the most egregious vote do you think that John Katko has made as a representative of Central New York?
I think he's cast a lot of bad votes. The one that I think is the worst for his constituents overall is his vote on the tax bill. I really, he is a representative from the state of New York. That tax bill is especially harmful for New Yorkers. And he stood up and stood with Donald Trump and Paul Ryan and said, I'm voting for this bill. And then he turned around and tried to tell us that it was good for us. And we know that it's not. It further increases wealth inequality in this country and income inequality by staggering amounts. It incentivizes corporations to send jobs overseas, while he's busy telling us it's actually bringing jobs to Central New York. We have seen report after report come out about how much money, millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, that CEOs are making and shareholders are making in stock buybacks and other things like that, while the wages for workers in this country are stagnant. We have not seen wage increases for the average person. And I think that any kind of tax policy that we design should be designed to put more money in the pockets of working families, not in the pockets of CEOs and shareholders.
You talked about taxes, how that tax vote you thought was one of the poor decisions. Barb also wants to know, what can you do, if anything, to help to lower property taxes for average Americans in this community?
So I'm not sure that as a member of Congress that's something that I can help with, because it's not in congressional control. It's not a federal issue. But I think the fact that we live in a place with high property taxes is one of the reasons why the vote for that bill was so terrible, because it put a cap on the amount of state and local tax that we can deduct. Right? And that's why it's an extra dose of punishment for New Yorkers, because we are a high tax state. And now John Katko and his colleagues have taken away our ability to deduct those taxes from our federal taxes. So we get penalized for making the decision as a state that we want to invest in public services. We have to look at tax policy as a balanced issue so that we take into account the state and local taxes that people are paying when we create federal policy. And this bill just punished New Yorkers and Californians and all the folks who've decided that they want to invest in public services.
On my way out here, I was driving through the lovely village of East Syracuse, and saw a guy with a Confederate flag on the back of his pickup. It was, of course, a pickup. And so a lot of people in this country right now are concerned about the climate, especially in regard to race and racism, and what they feel is a president that fuels that kind of energy. What do you have to say to people about what you can do as a legislator to affect, if anything, this sort of climate?
Yeah, I think it's one of the, if not the most troubling thing that we've seen happening since Trump took office. And I think, we're coming up here on the anniversary of the riot in Charlottesville that was really kind of a shocking thing to watch unfold. And I think we have to have really honest conversations about this in this country. These are not easy problems to solve, or they would have been solved already.
Right.
But we have to be willing to talk about them. And again, I will go back to the need for elected representatives to use their platform to speak, to say, this is wrong, this is not what we believe in, I won't tolerate this. I'm looking for my elected officials to do that. When the President of the United States looks at what happens in Charlottesville and says, there are very fine people on both sides,
yeah.
I'm expecting my elected representative the very next minute to say, no, there aren't.
No, there aren't.
And if my elected representative doesn't do that, as John Katko did not, my feeling is he does not belong in that office, because that office is about representing the people. It is not representing the people who agree with you, or the people who look like you, or the people who think like you. The job is representing all of the people, and that means standing up for what they need, for what they deserve. It means standing up for human dignity. It means working to protect the things that are most precious about living in a democratic society. And tolerance for one another and pluralism is a fundamental plank of democracy. It is being eroded right now under this president and this administration, and we need our elected officials to stand up and fight back against that.
Live here at the headquarters of Dana Balter for Congress in the 24th Congressional District, taking your Facebook Live questions right now. And I did see a question, and I'll ask it. I don't know, it refreshed away, but there was a question about your feelings about the the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and what your position might be regarding that, and what the United States should be doing for that position right now.
It's a very complicated situation. I am a firm supporter of Israel's right to exist. I am also a firm supporter of Palestinian rights, and I believe that the appropriate goal is a two-state solution, that both Israelis and Palestinians need to have sovereign states of their own where they are safe. And I think that the United States has historically played and needs to play a very important role as a broker for peace and an arbiter in this conflict. One of the things that's happened since Donald Trump took office that I'm very concerned about is I think our ability to credibly play that role has been damaged because of some of the policy decisions that he has made. And we need to recapture the ability to be able to be a strong voice for peace. We need to be willing to hold the Israeli government accountable for things that they do that are wrong. But we also need to remain a steadfast ally to the people of Israel and do everything we can to bring about a two-state solution.
We have international conflicts. We've got Iran, we've got North Korea, we have an administration that's under investigation for the possible collusion between a foreign agent. How do we make sense of all this?
Yeah, it's I describe it as a time of great chaos in our country. One of the things that I think we need to be very firm about, and that I want to see Congress pushing for, and I don't hear enough discussion of this, is making sure that we are using diplomacy, right? One of the things that Donald Trump has done is hollowed out our diplomatic corps. Right? He's gotten rid of a lot of people at the State Department. He hasn't hired new people into those positions. He has filled diplomatic positions like Secretary of State with military and intelligence personnel instead of diplomatic personnel. And I think that's really scary, because what he's done is he's gotten rid of a lot of our career professionals who have devoted their lives to the art of diplomacy. And that means that we are ever moving towards a position where military action will be our first response instead of our last response. And I think every American should be concerned about that.
one more quick thing. This came up, 81.
Mm-hmm.
What should happen there?
So I have been an outspoken supporter of the community grid. I believe very strongly that that is the best thing, not only for the city of Syracuse, but for the entire region. What we do with this project will shape the next 50 years. And what I think we need to focus on is good economic development. The community grid gives us the best opportunity to develop the economy of the city. It also gives us the best opportunity to improve the quality of life. It is the best environmentally sound option of all on the table. It will cause the least amount of damage to the environment. And very importantly, it will redress some of the racial and social injustice that was done by building that highway through the middle of the thriving African-American heart of the city. We need to reconnect the separated pieces of the city, and this is a way we can help end hypersegregation. A
lot of our Facebook listeners, watchers, are asking whether you believe that John Katko is a moderate.
No. And I know that he's very fond of positioning himself that way. But all you have to do is look at his voting record to see that he's not, right? He has voted with Donald Trump more than 90% of the time. I defy anybody to describe Donald Trump's agenda as moderate. John Katko talks a good game, but when you look at what he's done, he does not stand in a moderate position. He does not vote moderately on the issues. He does not stand up and fight for the interests of the people of this district. He aligns with his party. The one bill that he voted against, the one substantive bill he voted against his party on, which he uses as a badge of honor to show that he's a moderate, was the healthcare bill, right? He voted against the AHCA. And he said, see, I stand for you. I work against my party when it's in your interests. But then he turned around and voted for the tax bill. And the tax bill gutted the ACA. It cut the legs out from under that piece of legislation. And as a result, we are seeing premiums skyrocket. One of our largest insurers here in Central New York has told us to expect premium increases of over 36% next year. We are, as a direct result of that vote on the tax bill.
Who said that? What insurer?
Fidelis.
Wow.
That was in the Post Standard, maybe a month back. As a direct result of that vote on tax bill, people with pre-existing conditions are now being threatened. And in our district alone, we have over 296,000 adults under the age of 65 with pre-existing conditions. Those people are now at risk of losing their health care, right? So we can't allow him to get away with saying, I voted not to repeal health care. That's nonsense. He voted to destroy the ACA.
There's so many questions, so little time. One, let me just, can I just do like a roulette?
Sure, sure.
Let's see, Joseph wants to know, what can the Democratic leadership in Congress do to get the Trump administration to back off on its efforts to roll back environmental protections such as increased fuel efficiency for cars? Can I roll that together with what we do for our rural areas and how agriculture, so take both of those as your last two.
So the environment is probably one of the two top issues I get asked about in our rural communities, because farmers are depending on good environmental policy to make their livings, right? So we have to deal with environmental policy. We have to deal with water quality issues. That is a huge problem in our district. We all know about the algal blooms. We know about the flooding. One of the things that concerns me with the way John Katko and the GOP approach this problem is they are unwilling to acknowledge that climate disruption is a major cause of these problems. And until we acknowledge the cause, we're not going to be able to solve the problem. We also, we need to, I think, hold the people in leadership at the Environmental Protection Agency. Thankfully, we're rid of one, but now the person in his place turns out to be just as bad. We need to hold those folks responsible, and I want to see Congress launching ethics investigations. Where is John Katko, who bills himself as a rule of law guy? Where is he standing up and saying, this is unethical behavior and we need to investigate? Donald Trump has put people in charge of these areas of policy who are out to enrich themselves and not to protect the people.
Will you fight to protect and end abortion? Fight and protect to expand access?
Yes. This is there's no question about this. We need to protect women's rights. We need to protect women's access to health care of all kinds, including reproductive health care. And part of what we need to be doing with healthcare across the board is making it easier for people to access the services they need, not harder.
Dana Balter, she's a candidate for the 24th Congressional District, a Democrat. Lots of questions in her Facebook chat. Maybe we'll get to some of those later on, or like a little typed response. But we thank you for watching us, and next week we'll be back here with Al Sturpey, 7 o'clock here at the United Democrats for Onondaga County. In the meantime, Dana, good luck to you.
Thank you so much. It's great talking to you. Thanks, everybody.